Commanders, Rams, Panthers, Bills, Patriots, Raiders. Don't go anywhere. Stick here. You guys all drafted in the first round. We're not going to be going through the first round. Also, New York Jets fans pick 33 there. That's not real. It just doesn't allow me to undo the pick, and I don't want to reset from the beginning. I've already taken like 3 stabs at this draft, and we're on version 3 right now because the NFL keeps making trades and doing stuff every time that I try making this video or making the article. So welcome in. My name is Steve. This is the Fantasy Football Forge. Thank you for joining me today. And like I said, the first round is all in an article. I have a paragraph written up for each one. I'll show you where you can find that after we get through the Commanders, Rams, Panthers, Buffalo Bills, New England Patriots, and what they all did here in the first round, because you all, the rest of you, do have picks in the second round, and you'll see what we did in the first round there, and also please check out the article. So in the first round, the Washington Commanders stuck at pick 7. I don't love to do that. I actually think that the LA Rams and the Washington Commanders make really good trade partners if the Rams want to move up in this draft. I did not end up doing that here at pick 7, and I really couldn't tell you why not, but I didn't. Here's my write-up for the Washington Commanders and why they took Caleb Downs. In my first version of this mock, I had the Rams trading up for Carnell Tate here at pick 7. He's off the board in the second version that I'd created. We're on version 3. They could still be interested in moving up. I also think that Baltimore could move up, who I had trading with New Orleans in my first iteration of this mock draft. That also doesn't end up happening in this version. Washington wants to move back from this pick, but I think that teams are feeling comfortable watching how this board falls at this point in time, or at least that's how I felt until one more pick later when I did this. I said unless Washington was willing to give a discount for this pick, which is always a possibility, but new defensive coordinator Durante, I'm not sure, Jones is a Vic Fangio disciple. Having the ability to get 3 safeties on the field fits the system. I think they have a fun, interesting safety group, but they're missing a little bit there. And especially if they're going to want to get 3 safeties out there, I think bringing in Caleb Downs could make a lot of sense for Washington. So that's their final pick of the draft. I hope you stick around, Washington Commanders fans, to watch the rest of the video. But if not, there you go. LA Rams are up next because I did end up having them trade up to pick 8 for Jordan Tyson. And the trade here was the Rams sent pick 13 and 61 to get 8, and they got 136 back in return. For 61 back to 136, moved 13 up to 8. The Rams have been aggressive this offseason, and they're gunning for a championship. Their patience runs out just 1 pick later. Not only does this help their bid of going into for a championship, but they will need a wide receiver next year. Adams will almost certainly not be on this roster beyond 2026. Jordan Tyson can be that guy. Tyson is explosive and has great ball skills, and he runs clean routes. He's alignment versatile and can threaten all 3 levels of the field. If he can get up to speed in time for the playoffs and stay healthy, that's the big if here, and that's a big if he were to go this high in the draft. The team's going to have to feel, their medical staff is going to be having to clear this guy to some extent, and that's not a sure thing up here at pick 8, right? But I went for it with this mock draft, and this was one of those picks that I went for it with. So he'll be a piece that makes this offense unguardable. The Rams have the ability to be patient with him and make sure that he's fully recovered from his hamstring injury before they go full go with him. So I do think there's a little bit of freedom and liberty there. They don't necessarily need him to be ready to go week 1, but obviously you do want him to be involved and learning this offseason, especially if you're taking him up this high. So that's it for the Rams, since they did trade away their second-round pick. Don't have them trading back into the second, and that's going to bring us on to pick 12 for the Carolina Panthers. They end up trading their second-round pick to move up to pick 12, so they traded pick 19 and 51 in order to move up to 12, and they got pick 92 back in return because Jeremiah Love was still available on the board here at pick 12. And part of the thought process here is that whenever I'm drafting for Carolina at pick 19, it's one of those picks where I want to move back at that point in the draft for what I feel like their needs are. and what's available and where the value's at on the board, it's like, can we move back? But it's usually a pain point of I struggle to find a trade partner to come up there for them oftentimes. And maybe Carolina's doing their own mocks and they're feeling the same thing. And they're like, if the opportunity comes to strike for a guy, we should take that for a guy that they have their eyes on. And here, I think, is one of those opportunities that might catch their eye. So Carolina sees Jeremiah Love falling and decides to get aggressive to one of the best players, to add one of the best players in the draft to their offense. It's a pivotal year for Bryce Young. You want to see more growth from him. Love might be able to come in and not only improve this rushing attack, but also become a threat for Bryce Young as a receiver. He's a great receiving back, and it really helps a quarterback if you got a good, strong running game. So there you go, Jeremiah Love to the Panthers. That's it for you, though, in this draft, because of that trade up. That's going to bring us all the way back to the 26th pick of the draft, because the Buffalo Bills, they just don't have a second pick. I didn't do anything with it, a second round pick. So here at pick 26, I had them go with Avian Terrell. I haven't done that for them yet. Buffalo traded away Teron Johnson, and they added D. Alford early on in free agency. I think you can do better than D as your nickelback. Maybe they'll feel fine with D as their nickelback, but I think you can do better. Terrell is versatile, which could be it's always a value to these NFL teams to have versatility for players, but especially I think to the Bills in the situation that they're in, because I don't think that they can feel supremely confident in their first-round pick from last year, Maxwell Harrison, who struggled to get on the field and struggled to stay healthy. He looked promising in the small sample size that he was on the field, so you feel pretty good about it, but availability is king ultimately, and he just wasn't too available last year, and it's a small sample size, so you really still don't know exactly what you have of him. So if he doesn't end up turning out, hey, take another stab here with Avian Terrell. But for now, the plan would be to put Avian Terrell in as your nickelback as an upgrade at that spot, and gives you a little bit of protection from injuries and everything out on the boundary where I think that he can play. Might not be his best position in the NFL, but I think he can survive out there for you if need be, and maybe he's really good at it anyways at the NFL level. That's going to bring us on to the final pick for the New England Patriots at pick 31. They're going to end up trading this 63rd pick back to pick 78. In the process, they're going to move pick 95 up to 85 and 125 all the way up to 99. So they would end up with 3 third-round picks. I think there's some pretty decent value in the third round of this draft, and just given that's a good trade. Like, that's a team had to pay up a little bit in order to get the Patriots off of that 63rd pick there, but also I think for what their needs were and what the board was looking like, it made some sense for them to be able to just get kind of 1 or 2 more players in that area of the draft there, maybe 2 more there. So there you go. That's going to bring us on to the last pick of the first round, which is the Las Vegas Raiders. I have them moving up to pick 32. So, of course, you went Fernando Mendoza with your first pick. And then I have you going with Denzel Boston here, or maybe there's a different preferred wide receiver that they would go with. Omar Cooper, not available here. That's originally in version 2 of this mock draft. That's who I had him trading up for. But I kept that trade in version 3 because I was tired of updating this, but also because I think getting ahead of the New York Jets could be something that they might be wanting to do, the New York Giants might be wanting to do, if they have a wide receiver target that they want to grab out of who's still available on the board. So I wrote that Las Vegas moves up to give their new quarterback one more weapon to work with on offense. Trey Tucker, Jack Besh, Jalen Naylor, they're all quite versatile in where you can line them up, and Denzel Boston himself has experience as a receiver who can be lined up all over the place, who was lined up all over the place in his final season at Washington. Add to that the deep threat that they have in Dante Thornton as their wide receiver 4, presumably, and then you got Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty, who are very accomplished receivers for their positions, and Mendoza's going to have, although, and admittedly it's an unproven, but potentially very complete complement of pass weapons to work with once you add a guy like Denzel Boston, or preferably, I think, an Omar Cooper into that room. Would be a very, very nice thing for them to do for their young quarterback. So those write-ups are just some of the write-ups. Let me show you how you can find my article before we get into the second round of this draft. Here you're looking at my website. Right above where you can see our little tabs to different areas on the website. You know how that works, and you just click on the articles tab, and there it'll bring you immediately. There's some other articles of stuff in the past, but to the current NFL draft, you can look at historical stuff if you want to go back and look at that. My 1.0 mock draft is up here, which we will look at that, as well as, let me just show you some resources as well here. So the 2.0 mock draft will be up. It's not up there right now, but it'll be up by the time that this video goes up, or it should be, or very shortly after. But up here you can find the combine. That'll be loading for a moment. That'll be combine results that you'll be able to see. You can see my big board, which needs to be updated. My positional rankings videos, if you haven't checked those out. The safety, cornerback video, the edge rush video just actually came out a little while before recording this video. And then my scouting reports are also available. These are just Word documents for the scouting reports, plus strengths, weaknesses, and some notes, and some write-ups for a lot of the players. And it's not the most pretty looking thing. It's on a Word doc, but it is all in alphabetical order, first name. So you can find them all in alphabetical order. Track down any players that you're looking for. You know, on draft day, if you just want to see some quick opinions, some strengths and weaknesses that I had on them, there you go. Here is the page where I have every position. You can just look at the combine results. It's nice and color coded compared to the last 5 years of combine results. Where do they stand? Each measurement. Now, you know, I say excellent height. Of course, being taller to a certain extreme is not necessarily better, especially at every position. But that's just kind of how the color coding goes. And you can also click right up here to bring you to the sheet. So if you wanted to download the sheet and use it for your own purposes, you have that ability to do it. And this is what my 1.0 looks like. This is what the 2.0 will look like. I think it's a nice, easy format to go through, and I just have a little write-up on each of the picks. So that is going to bring us now back into the draft for the second round of this draft. Like I said, pick 33 there, Jets, not taking C.J. Allen. That's not the pick. I was just messing around before doing this, and I clicked on it, and it won't let me undo the pick because I did it twice because I'm an idiot. But for the New York Jets here at pick 33, we're looking at wide receiver. There we go. We've already got the wide receivers right up there. That's the position that we're looking at. If you want to kind of see this board right now, these are some of the players that are available after the first round there. So it might be some surprises for you, might be some not surprises, but that's what the board looks like. And a couple of wide receivers just went off earlier than this, leaving Casey Concepcion. But I do think that he's an interesting, nice fit into this wide receiver room in New York. The question for him now is that he just recently had a knee scope, and is that going to scare teams away from taking him this high up in the draft, or is maybe that's what's going to prevent him from going in the first round and being available here? The Jets are in a position where they can technically be a little bit patient, although I say that, and at the same time, their coaching staff is fighting for their lives. That's very clear with how they've been addressing this offseason. But he's supposed to be ready to go in May. And like I said, I think he's a fun, interesting fit into this wide receiver room. Could make some sense for them. And he can attack all 3 areas of the field. He's kind of versatile in where you can line him up. So I can't click on that yet. That was Casey Concepcion to the Jets. That's not their final pick. So you'll see when we get to the final pick of each of the players, you'll see what we did in the first round. And I'll recap any trades that happened then. And some of the first round picks I'll talk about, but a lot of them I won't, because once again, there's that write-up. And guys, I don't make any money for you visiting my website. It's not behind a paywall. It's just effort that I put into it. I would love you to go check that article out. If article is what you can call it. So at pick 34, we've got the Arizona Cardinals after the Jets went with Casey Concepcion, not C.J. Allen. And the Arizona Cardinals are looking at the board, and C.J. Allen is the best player available in many ways, and they could use an improvement in their linebacker room. He's not the best player available on my big board, I don't think, at this point. I'm a little bit lower on him, but on the consensus board he is. On this board he would be. And I think that there are some other areas, though, that they could look at before we get into locking that pick in. You definitely want to take a look at this interior of this defensive line. Peter Woods, much higher on the consensus board even than this board. Kristen Miller, Lee Hunter still available. That's an area where they've invested in quite a bit in recently. I don't know that they're ready to spend this high of draft capital on that position before they've, completely know what they have there. But at the same time, maybe. And then they might end up trading Josh Sweat away. I'm not. These trade things happen all the time, and by that I mean they don't actually end up happening, just rumors happen. So I'm not going to go like that happen, but if they were at need for an edge rusher here, there's some good edge rushers that are available that I think would be worth taking off the board at this point. But I have them going with linebacker C.J. Allen once again. I think they could use some improvement in that room, but we are going to end up giving them Casey Concepcion because I screwed that up. But that was the final pick for Arizona, and I screwed up there. So in the first round, the Arizona Cardinals took right tackle Francis Maui Noah. I will try to show you from now on when we get to the final tick. Like here, for the Tennessee Titans, they took David Bailey at pick 6. Now, they have the 4th pick in the draft because they traded back with the Cleveland Browns, acquired some capital with that. So you can see they got pick 70 from Cleveland. And then I want to say maybe and 147, and they gave back a pick in there. All the details are up in the article, but they do have another 3rd round pick there in pick 70, early 3rd round pick that they can work with. They could package 70 and 64 to move up for a wide receiver if they wanted to move up for one. I also think that there will be some available wide receivers there because we're not going to go wide receiver here for Tennessee. We're going to continue to look on the defensive side of the ball on that front 7 to another linebacker who I think could go higher than C.J. Allen. I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up having him higher than C.J. Allen on my board. I think right now I just have him tied, but I really like Jacob Rodriguez. I don't know what's bad about Jacob Rodriguez, to be perfectly honest. So I guess we're going to add 2 Texas Tech guys here for Tennessee. So Jacob Rodriguez is going to be the pick. He is athletic. He's good. I mean, look at his grades. So he can do it all. He's a really, really good linebacker. And I'm interested to watch him again, too, because last time I watched him, he was much lower on the boards, and sometimes that can influence your thoughts going into a player a little bit. Here we go. Seattle Seahawks at pick 36. They've got another pick in this draft. At the end of this round, they move back from pick 34 to pick 36. I want to say I just covered that, but they acquired, pick 114 or something like that from Las Vegas. Here I'm looking at cornerback. They could always add to really any area. I mean, Emmanuel Pregnon, they could just shore up the interior of that offensive line. That's definitely a thought. But yeah, I'm looking at the cornerbacks here, and Colton Hood is the next guy up on the consensus boards, on some people's boards like this board. I really like Chris Johnson here for Seattle. I think he's a better system fit than Colton Hood would be. Colton Hood struggles in zone, really, really a good man coverage corner, which is part of why I have him a little bit lower on my board. A lot of teams run a lot of zone, but there's a place for Colton Hood definitely in the NFL. But we're going to go Chris Johnson here for the Seattle Seahawks, and just a better fit than Colton Hood, I think, systematic-wise. You look at Chris Johnson, 91.9 zone coverage grade. Now, these grades aren't everything, but he is really good in zone coverage, and I think he's a good cornerback. I like him a lot, so that's the pick there for Seattle. They'll have another one in this draft. New York Giants are going to be finishing their draft up here with Mansour. They took Mansour Delane there at pick 5. I will talk about this pick just a little bit because I did have some hesitancy with it after realizing what they've done in free agency and who they have. Paulson Adebo, they've got on a pretty monstrous-ish contract, especially for what kind of production they've gotten from him. He's been disappointing compared to that contract. Was far from one of the top 32 cornerbacks in the league, and I'm pretty sure that contract would fit him in the top 32. But he is, I think that contract's going to be cuttable next year to a point where it's cuttable if he has another year like this last year and they were to hit on a guy like Mansour Delane. They also took a chance, and then maybe they wouldn't cut him anyways, but they also added in free agency Greg Newsome, I believe, on a 1-year prove-it kind of deal. So they, on one hand, they might feel like, well, we've got our 2 starters. We've made our decision, we made our bed, we're going to lay in it. At the same time, there isn't much promise for the future, and I don't think that they have a true number 1 cornerback right now. And I do think that, I know that the NFL, apparently, I should say, Maybe I don't know it, but the reports are that the NFL does view Mansour Delane as like a top 10 draft pick in this year's draft. That's how I've felt about him since watching him. I really think that he's a stud. I love how he plays, highly technical, really smart. Just a I mean that's what translates to the next level as long as you have enough athletics, and I'm pretty darn sure that he's a good enough athlete. Should be fine there. So that's a little bit of a question mark for him. That's like the only little bit of a question mark, but doesn't sound like the NFL is afraid enough of it either. So Mansour Delane here went at pick 5, and my write-up goes into a little bit of a different conversation with that pick. But here at pick 37 for the New York Giants, you got to think you're looking at wide receiver. You got to give, a playmaker for Jackson Dart to work with. This wide receiver room's pretty anemic after Malik Neighbors, who's, of course, also going to be probably not going to quite be himself this season, going to be coming back from an injury. Luckily, he's young, so hopefully he can. Now, in this scenario, the last time I did this, end up having him taking Casey Concepcion here, but he's not available, and honestly, I kind of like the funness, maybe not the talent level quite, of Jeremy Bernard compared to Casey Concepcion as an overall prospect, but I really like an element that Jeremy Bernard could add to this offense. So if you're not familiar with Jeremy Bernard, he's kind of a Debo-esque type of prospect in the way that he can go over the middle, really tough over the middle. You can line him up in the backfield. He did a lot of that in college. He has that Debo-ness to him. A possibly better comp, considering the offensive coordinator that they have in New York now, Matt Nagy, previously with Kansas City, would be Rashee Rice. He definitely has that, once again, that ability to go over the middle, to work zones, to work against zone defenses and find those soft spots. Like, that's what Jeremy Bernard can bring to this unit, which I think would be very valuable. But going back to him being able to line up in the backfield, you think of having Jackson Dart there and the rushing threat that he provides, and toughness. I mean, this is a tough dude, and you think of Cam Scadaboo and Jackson Dart and how tough he can be. Like, the mobility, the wrinkles that you can start to add into this offense with a guy like Jeremy Bernard, I think ends up being really fun. You bring him into the backfield, you got the RPO, you can hand it off, you can not hand it off, you can scramble, and if you do have a designated run, and Jeremy Bernard either gets the ball or doesn't, but either way, Jeremy Bernard can, if he doesn't get the ball, which you probably won't most of the time, he can come and he can block, a cornerback over here or a linebacker coming on the inside and help to open up that lane for Jackson Dart to pop off one of those big runs that he likes to do. So I think that could be a really fun addition for the New York Giants. That is the end of their mock draft here, the 2-rounder. Houston Texans are up on the clock. They went with Keldrick Falk with that first pick. I know I have some Houston fans that watch, so I'll give a quick little bit of a tidbit on the usage of Keldrick Falk, because, I mean, you've got 3 good edge rushers, but one of them might be out sooner than later, a little bit of an aging guy, expensive, and I think his contract only runs through this year, maybe for 2 more seasons. And why can't I think of his name? Because I want to say it's Jonathan Grenard, and I know that that's not it. Danielle Hunter, there we go. So Danielle Hunter, expensive, might not be here for too long, so Keldrick Falk could end up being your number 2 opposite of Will Anderson down the road. But in the short term, obviously, it just adds to the room. You can never have too many edge rushers. But also, he's a big dude. You can bring him onto the inside on the pass, down in distance types of situations, and in sub packages, you can get him out there on the inside. He can hold up in there. So, I think he'd be a fun addition to this defensive line and just overall. I was thinking with pick 59 of trading up, and I don't know what position. I didn't leave myself a good note on that one, so I don't know what that was about, but I don't end up doing that. However, I am going to complete the defensive line for Houston at this point in the draft. I think that Kristen Miller is a guy that Houston definitely might want in terms of the defensive linemen that are available, because he's just a stud against the run. I think they want to continue to be very good against the run. That's important. They like to stuff the run first. So the thing about Kristen Miller is he's kind of one of those guys, you know what you're getting. As a run stuffer, the ceiling's great, but overall as a player, there's a bit of a ceiling there potentially, whereas Peter Woods has no ceiling. The sky is the limit for Peter Woods. So as an overall prospect, he does offer more upside. So would they go for a guy like that? Consensus, he's like a top 20 player, maybe still on the consensus boards. So I'm going to have Houston going that route, but I wouldn't be surprised if even if Peter Woods were available, if it was Kristen Miller that they would go for. That's going to bring the New Orleans Saints up onto the clock. They went with Caleb Banks there at pick 24. Now, he just had a broken toe. That I don't know if it's the same foot or different foot, but broken toe. He had foot issues that prevented him from playing much this year at Florida. Starting to sound like a guy that maybe you don't want to be taken in the first round. So I don't know where NFL teams are going to be on that. It is just a broken toe, so like in terms of the short-term health, you're not really too concerned about that. Should be up and running soon enough. I shouldn't say that like it's nothing, but it's his fourth metatarsal, so it's neither the pinky or the big toe, which I think makes it a little bit better. But yeah, New Orleans Saints are on the clock. I'm looking at the board. I look at their needs, of course, and I have this gaping hole at the nickelback spot on my board for them. Now, I do think that they have some candidates on their roster, maybe, that they could put in. Obviously, they could always put somebody in as their nickelback, their slot corner, but I have that blank right now for them. And I think that Brandon Cisse, that's like where I think he'll find his best spot in the NFL is as that slot cornerback, nickelback. And he also gives a team like the Saints some versatility to be a guy who he could win the job out on the boundary. And I also think that he has some versatility to play at safety. Like he's one of those guys who has a lot of versatility and can be moved around like when injuries happen and stuff like that. So that's always a plus. That's why I have him going over D'Angelo Pons here. As much as I love D'Angelo Pons, I just think Cisse's going to go higher than him because there's less limitations to his game by a long shot, really. I think this is a good pick for New Orleans. You got Kool-Aid McKinstry, and then I think it's going to be Quincy Riley, is it? Is that the right name? Who I think is going to be your other cornerback. Both of them good young cornerbacks so far for their careers, but once again, Brandon Cisse gives you a little bit more just options overall in that defensive back room to build it out, and that versatility works nicely. Kansas City Chiefs here with their final pick of the draft at pick 40. Ruben Bain at pick 9. Blake Miller at pick 29, so they didn't do anything. Oh, I did not mention for New Orleans, they traded back twice, so that's why they ended up getting Caleb Banks, because that was all the way back at pick 20. Was it 25? 13, and then, it was a trade back. It ended up being like 25-ish or something like that, where they ended up taking their first pick. So that's why it was not Caleb Banks at pick 8. I can tell you that much. So here at pick 40 for the Kansas City Chiefs with their final pick of the draft, they've done quite well. We're going to stick with best player available. We're going to stick with the cornerbacks here. Got a little bit of a heater going on for the cornerback position, and they've done really well with athletic, physical press man corners in the past. That's exactly what Colton Hood is. He can get a little overly grabby and a little too aggressive at times, but I think Kansas City's kind of fine with that. I will say where I think he needs to take his biggest step of improvement, which will help him to maybe be a little bit less grabby, would be with his football IQ and his instincts. I think those are a little bit lacking in his game. But like at the end of the day, his potential is a shutdown corner. Like he has that within him. I think at the end of the day, he just becomes a really good CB2 for a team, but there's a nice ceiling there. This is the type of cornerback that you've found success with in Kansas City. And so they go Ruben Bain, Blake Miller, and Colton Hood to open up the draft in the first 2 rounds. I think those are some nice, strong additions to add to that team. So that's going to bring us on to the Cincinnati Bengals in the first round. They took Sonny Styles. This is going to be their final pick of this draft. And this is an organization, specifically a previous coach, who's never been too concerned with character concerns, especially minor character concerns. Just doesn't seem to bother them. And this is also a player, we're looking at the edge room, by the way. This is a player who has the good size and athletics. They like their size, speed types of combo guys. Zion Young, 6'5", 262. So really good size, and once again, a good athlete as well. You're going to add an edge rusher in there. So Sonny Styles, edge rusher, we're going to, fix this defense, right? That's the biggest thing that you want to do in Cincinnati, and I think that those two can help you to do that real quickly, because they did start to look a little bit better last year. Some guys started to turn it around. here at pick 42, we do have the final pick for the New Orleans Saints. Went Caleb Banks there. Pick 24. I knew it wasn't 25 because I know who's at 25. That's a very memorable pick, and we'll get to that one because that's a stunning pick. Actually, it might be on the thumbnail. And then at pick 39, went with Brendan Cisse. And at pick 42, I thought about trading back, but we've already traded back twice in the first round, gathered some extra capital, and at the end of the day, you just don't want to mess around with potentially losing out on your target here. And when we want to add some weapons here on offense, we want to make sure to give Tyler Shough every chance to be successful, because if Tyler Shough can be a actual franchise quarterback, that's going to be, that just sets this franchise ahead of expectation because they went ahead and took a chance on a guy in the second round. So let's give it a chance to work. And when you look at Tyler Shough and what he's best at, his most accurate ball is the deep ball. That's where he throws the most accurate ball. So I think that a large man, and I shouldn't even say large, tall man like Chris Brazel, 6'5", maybe 5.5, even 200 pounds there, and just lightning fast, that's going to work really nicely, not only for Tyler Shough, but also in this wide receiver room. You've got Chris Olave, who's your target getter, your every down kind of move him around, and he can attack all three areas of the field, run any kind of route, and it's just going to get the most balls thrown his way. Then you've got Devon Vele, who's also, younger than Chris, and he is developing still, but he's a nice possession receiver. I think a very nice possession receiver to have on the team. So now you add in the real big-bodied, Vele is also tall, but deep threat with some extra speed, and that really starts to complete this wide receiver room for Tyler Shough. So I really like this addition to New Orleans, and so Chris Brazel, the second, it is. I will say I'm a little bit lower on him, but consensus-wise, starts to get, we're starting to get into the range of where he should be going anyways, according to consensus. Miami Dolphins, with their final pick of this draft. Why don't I have a note for them? Oh, I know why. Because we've got a trade coming up. So, forgot about the tiniest trades of all. The New York Jets, from pick 44, are going to be moving all the way up here to pick 43. Going to give the Miami Dolphins pick 228 in return. Miami could use bodies. They can just use opportunities on getting guys. So they're not going to mind this. The Jets are doing this in order to move up a spot because they don't want somebody jumping them. And to be honest, I think for good purpose, because they've got the Baltimore Ravens sitting right behind them who might have their eyes on this guy as well. Does that give you an idea of what position we're looking at? I can give you another clue. It's the best player available on this board. So the New York Jets went linebacker Arvell Reese at pick 2, pick 16. They went Jamal McCoy, then they went C.J. Allen. We saw that. And now we're going to add Emmanuel Pregnon here. The Jets jump one spot to make sure that they don't get jumped. We're going to move Joe Tippmann back to center. He's a previous college center, played center for the New York Jets, and then moved out to guard last year. But we're going to move him back into center, and we're going to put Emmanuel Pregnon out at guard. And before you go and start typing that the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins would never make a trade, I'm going to save you some embarrassment, because just like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, this month, not too long ago, the Jets traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick from the Miami Dolphins. So clearly, these two teams are willing to trade with one another. Now, on to the Miami Dolphins, who took Spencer Fano at pick 11. And then at pick 30, they took Omar Cooper Jr. Miami Dolphins fans I've had, a couple of people, or maybe the same person a couple of times, bring up, like, oh, the interior of that offensive line's an absolute mess. Look, the whole team's an absolute mess. But you know what? You got to address somewhere. And so in this situation, I do have them taking Fano. I got the hiccups, so there'll be a bit of a cut there, but Omar Cooper, they took at pick 30 with their newly acquired pick after sending Jalen Waddle away. I will be surprised if this ends up being the pick here a little bit, because I don't know that a guy this small is going to end up going. So a lot of holes. One of those holes in the second, they've got about 5 holes in their secondary right now that they need to fill. And we're going to start off by filling that with D'Angelo Pons, a very undersized guy. Probably going to have to play as a nickel, but I mean, man, he's so good in college. 5'9", 173, right? But look at those coverage grades, and his tape is just so awesome to watch. I'm not the only one that loves him. Basically, everybody loves him. So once again, like, I'll be a little bit surprised the NFL ends up taking him this high, but I haven't seen a single person not like him, and the consensus board is still this high on him. So the thing that I like about D'Angelo Pons for Miami is that they really do have this blank slate of a secondary. So by bringing D'Angelo Pons in, and by knowing at this point that you're going to have a guy like D'Angelo Pons who's going to have some limitations, and you're going to find out how much you can stretch those limitations to see, can he play on the boundary? Because you're probably going to want to find out if he can, to find out exactly what you have. So this is a rebuild that's going to take more than 1 year. This allows you to maybe build around what D'Angelo Pons does best. I'm not maybe saying necessarily build around D'Angelo Pons, but build the rest around his limitations. And, because of the blank slate, I just think that makes it easier than bringing D'Angelo Pons into something that's completely established. Like, now you have the flexibility to paint a picture around this beautiful black spot that you started out with. So D'Angelo Pons it is to Miami. That finishes their 2-round mock up, and Baltimore is going to end up receiving an offer here from the Green Bay Packers. I don't know if the Packers will do this. They don't have the most best capital in this draft class. They didn't have a first rounder, and they're one of those teams that does tend to like their picks. So now it's like, okay, we're going to get pick 45, 84, and then 158 is our first 3 picks in the draft. It's I don't know, but there are some players out there with some value, specifically at a position that I think is of need. And hey, you know what? The Packers love nothing more than getting some 7th-round picks. So they're going to ask Baltimore to throw in 249 here, send 52 and 120 to move up to 45. Baltimore's going to say, sure, we're fine with that. And the Green Bay Packers, they have a need that I don't know if they still think is a need after free agency, but I believe that they still have a need along that interior of their defensive line for a guy who can really stuff the run. That's where they struggle with the most, and that puts them in some bad situations and some third and easies very often. And if they can get a guy who can stuff the run like Kristen Miller, I think that would be very valuable. So seeing Kristen Miller still available here at pick 45, the Packers can't help themselves. They also love their Georgia boys, so that's the logic here for the Green Bay Packers spending up there. Now, look at that. Do you see that? Do you see what happened at pick 25? Tampa Bay Buccaneers traded back from pick 15 with the Chicago Bears all the way to pick 25, picked up some extra capital and set themselves up perfectly to catch the entire NFL world. Twitter's a buzzin', X is a buzzin'. Ty Simpson going to Tampa Bay. I should probably explain this one a little bit because I know not all of you are going to go to the article. The gist of it is that, look, they just lost. Mike Evans, long time, wanted to finish his time with the team, career-long player there in Tampa Bay, and if he believed in the quarterback, he would have stayed. But he doesn't believe in where the organization's at, where the quarterback's at. He's hunting, right? He's hunting for something. Baker Mayfield's not under contract beyond this year. They could set themselves up to potentially move on from Baker Mayfield, and at pick 25 is definitely, putting some heat on the situation. But they still haven't made the decision to extend Baker Mayfield up to the point of filming this. So I don't know, man. It's a big brain play here that I'm taking a shot at. And also, by trading back like this, Tampa Bay did not tip off anybody to what might be happening, and this kind of gets at the front of the area where a team might be trading up to get Ty Simpson at the back of the first, so that way they get that extra year on the contract, so nobody has any clue what's happening, and then at pick 25, they strike. Now, it is Ty Simpson, so I'm sorry, Tampa Bay. But at the same time, I do think he probably ends up going in the first. Here at pick 46, this is not the final pick of the draft. They do still have another pick. We're looking at the cornerbacks here. Caleb Lomu's still sitting out here, but tackle-wise, I think Tampa Bay's in a pretty good position. There's probably some sort of argument that you could make as to why that might make sense for them. But I am looking at the cornerbacks here. There's some good talent on the board that should be going off around this point in the draft. And I think that Keith Abney is a really, really good fit, really good in-zone coverage for a Todd Bowles system. From my understanding, he is shorter than what Todd Bowles prefers, but he does not play to that size. So I think, watching the tape, he's one of those types of guys where you could say, thresholds be darned. This guy's a great fit for the system, and I really like how he plays. So we're going to go with Keith Abney here to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Indianapolis Colts are on the clock, and just like that, after waiting for 7 minutes, they're not on the clock anymore because, in the meantime, Pittsburgh offered them a trade. I've got Pittsburgh getting pretty aggressive. Look at all this trade capital they've got, so they can make some move-ups in order to get to targets that they like, get guys that are falling in their opinion. In my opinion, at this point, there's definitely still some of those around. So Pittsburgh's going to send pick 53, 135, up to 47, and they took Vega Ioane in the first round. There was a comment on one of the recent videos suggesting, maybe not so kindly, but suggesting that the Pittsburgh Steelers would be looking at guard. And, I have an argument for them not to go guard. But here's the argument for them going guard. They have a young offensive line that's going to be pretty expensive in the short in the short term here. They've got some contracts that are going to be coming up, and not going to be able to afford all of them. Spencer Anderson, I think his name is their other guard that they have, a 7th rounder who's been extremely serviceable for a 7th round guard for them. Has done very well for that, but he also could be upgraded again upon, and he also might just be at his ceiling at this point. And he also, if he were to have another year like he had last year, might be kind of expensive for a team that might not want to be spending so much money at every spot on their offensive line, or at 4 even spots on their offensive line. So he would be the guy that might get sacrificed. So we're going to be probably improving on that spot this year anyways with Vega, and then we're not going to get ourselves into some sort of bind next year where we're having to let a guy go because he's too expensive and we don't have a plan already in place there. So Vega allows you to get cheaper along the offensive line and hopefully upgrade there too. Could make some sense. I get it. Here at pick 47, we are going to get that interior defensive lineman, and this works nicely. The interior defensive line, just in general, ends up falling a little bit in this draft. They get the last of that top 5 here in Lee Hunter. You can see ranked 39th on this board. I think maybe like 42nd or something on the consensus board. Definitely pretty high on my personal board. I love Lee Hunter. But in this version, he just kind of fell a little bit. Pittsburgh comes up, gets him. He's still available. It's too enticing for them. They got Cameron Hayward, who's going to end up retiring sooner than later. He's aging. You can create a little, get him off the field maybe a little bit more, too, if Lee Hunter quickly gets up to speed and just really build a rotation out there and be the future replacement. Here at pick 48, we've got the Atlanta Falcons. And originally, I had Denver trading up to this pick. I should say originally, in version number 2 at least, I had Denver trading up to this pick for Chris Bell, but now they've traded away their first round pick for Jalen Waddle, so I don't really think that that's what's going to be happening here. In that scenario, I had the Falcons taking R. Mason Thomas later in the draft. Had them trading back, and then ended up getting R. Mason Thomas, which I thought made a lot of sense given DC Jeff Ulbrich. So Mason Thomas still available right now on the board. It could be a guy that they would go for here even, or could be a guy that they do end up trading back and maybe they still get if he were to be still available. It's a good fit for Jeff Ulbrich. It's the type of edge rusher that Jeff Ulbrich typically likes, although R. Mason Thomas is quite small, but he's a speed rusher. That being said, Caleb Lomu in this version of the mock is now still available. I originally had him going to Denver with their first pick, and he wasn't available, but he is here, and it's too good. I always want to trade back from this spot for Atlanta. I want more picks than this for them. But with Caleb Lomu sitting here, with them being at where they're at for their tackles, they have an underperforming 34-year-old left tackle in Jake Matthews and a right tackle coming off of a season-ending lower left leg injury, which happened in the final week of training camp last year, and it was an all-season injury. So, hopefully he's coming back and he's healthy, but of course, I don't even think that we know exactly what that injury was. Lomu is a real nice get here. I don't think that they can pass up on him if he's still available here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take Caleb Lomu for the Atlanta Falcons. Minnesota Vikings are on the clock. They went Dylan Thieneman at pick 18, so they didn't do any kind of trading in the first round. And let's see. Originally, I had them going with Jadarian Price with this pick, and then they ended up bringing Aaron Jones back. So that's how long ago this mock draft goes. Over a week ago is when I started doing this, and it's once again we're on version 3 or maybe even 4. So originally I had them going with Jadarian Price. They brought Aaron Jones back. Does that stop them from going with Jadarian Price here? I'm not so sure that it does. They could still take him if they like him plenty. I'm also really tempted to take safety, AJ Halsey, right there. He is a big safety, 222 pounds at 6 foot. Would be a real nice compliment to Dylan Thieneman. Dylan Thieneman is your rangy safety that you can trust on the backside, and AJ Halsey, that bigger guy that can come down and help against the run even a little bit more. You'd like to see AJ Halsey be a little bit better on the run than he is, but he's got the size to be a stud there. So that could be a really fun pairing, just throwing that out there. Then in the second version of this mock draft, I had them going with Jeremy Bernard. So I never ended up picking AJ Halsey from him, but that's one of those that I just wanted to point that out. So I had them going with Jeremy Bernard here, which I think would be a really good fit in this offense. We already, for similar reasons, him and Kyler Murray, as to what I talked about with Jackson Dart and him, I think that creates some real fun things that an offense can do, and I definitely trust the Minnesota Vikings staff to unlock that and get the most out of it. But he's not available, so I'm going to give them a similar prospect in terms of this being another gadgety-ishness type of profile. I would say more gadgety than Jeremy Bernard is in Zachariah Branch. So we're going to stick with wide receiver, in part because then I didn't have to do too much reshuffling when I finally did another version of this mock draft, because I was filming this when that Jalen Waddle trade happened. The version 2 I was filming. So I got done with that, and then I saw the trade. I was like, God damn. So I had to redo everything. But I was able to keep several of the picks. This is one of them I had to change. He can still be used on end arounds. He can still bring you that kind of stuff like Jeremy Bernard would bring. And, that's just something that's going to help to keep defenses on their toes and help open up rushing lanes for Kyler in the RPO game. You can get really fun here. So we're going to go with Zachariah Branch. This is the final pick for the Minnesota Vikings. I don't think I have to talk about the Dylan Thieneman trade, but you can see my conversation on that once again in the article up on the website, www.theFFforge.com, Detroit Lions. Guys, don't forget to please like, comment, and subscribe. That would be really, really helpful. I forgot to ask for that earlier, and I know us YouTubers always be asking for that, but I know that sometimes when creators ask for it, I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot to give you a like on the video. So it's just a reminder. Detroit Lions here went Max Ihanicher. I still want to pronounce it incorrectly, but I'm getting close to that being the natural way that I'm going to say it. So Max Ihanicher, I'm pretty much locking in as a guy who I really think the Detroit Lions would have their eyes on. I don't know, pick 17 might be a little too high, but anytime that I'm trading back with them, like that's my target for them. I think that Dan Campbell would really like Max Ihanicher. Here at pick 50 is the final pick of this mock draft for the Detroit Lions. I think we're looking at linebacker. I think you want to add another linebacker in there. They lose Alex Anzalone. And I think that what they would really like to pair with Jack Campbell is going to be a coverage linebacker. And it just so happens that one of my favorite linebackers in this class, Jake Galladay, is very good at coverage. He's also very good against the run, and I think that's an area that he can improve in yet more because he was actually one of those guys, safety to linebacker convert. And, the run is something that like the Lions have an emphasis on stopping the run first. And Jake Galladay, once again, can help you out in that just fine. Jack Campbell's also doing that pretty well. And then Jake Galladay gives you a little bit of extra coverage ability from the linebacker position. So that's the route that we're going to go there. Dallas Cowboys went with Emmanuel McNeil-Warren at pick 19. So they traded back from pick 12 to pick 19 in the first round, picked up some sort of draft capital from Carolina. They picked up this pick from Carolina and, maybe did something else there. The specifics, once again, are in that article, but they went Caden McDonald there at pick 20, so working on this defense, and we're going to continue to work on this defense with this next pick. Going to the cornerbacks, going back to the defensive backs, they need help with their nickelback. Currently, I don't know that you want to trust Reddy Stewart is the guy who I have locked in as their current nickelback based on the roster as it is today. Keontae Scott is one of these really fun, elite against the run types of cornerbacks who's going to be slot only. He's limited in what he can do, but what he does really well. His tape is hella fun to watch. He had 5 sacks, 13 tackles for a loss in 2025. He's not shabby in coverage either, but once again, he's just limited. So you just don't ask too much of him, and you'll be putting him in places to succeed. And I think where this could work really nice systematically is that this is a system that's probably not, we don't know for sure how it's going to look, but probably not going to be sending too many blitzes. They kind of rely on their front guys, their front four, in order to create pressure. And in that instance, you don't want those guys having to worry about the run too much. So if they know, hey, I've got Keontae Scott over my right shoulder, over my left shoulder here, I can just pin my ears back and go, because I know that if the play ends up, being a screen pass over my head, or just ends up being a run play that I lose contain on, my boy Keontae Scott has got my back, and he's going to be able to come down and really help in the run game. So that's where I think Keontae Scott could really make sense for Dallas, and now we're really moving this defense in the right direction. We know that offense can work. So, that's a team that wants to compete now, and I think that those 3 additions to that defense would be nice for Dallas. Baltimore Ravens up on the clock. Next, we got Mekhi Lemon at pick 14, so they didn't do any kind of trades there. And here at pick 52, I mentioned earlier that we would have been thinking about jumping up ahead of the New York Jets there to the Miami Dolphins spot and taking a guard. There is still a guard that, according to the consensus board, should maybe even be gone by now, but should be going around this area of the draft in Chase Besantis. I really like Keelan Rutledge a lot myself, but we will go with Chase Besantis. We're not going to see Keelan go, but I think he's a guy who could go in the second. But yeah, Chase Besantis is the last of the guards of this tier, still available there, so the trade back ends up working really nicely there for Baltimore. They get maybe their guy in Chase Besantis. You can tell I have some hesitancies on him, as far as some people think like first round potential kind of guy. I don't really see that. Here at pick 53, we got the Indianapolis Colts with their first and final pick of this draft. Currently, their linebacker core took a combined total of 8 snaps on defense last year. So you would think that I'm going to take a linebacker for them. And you know what? I did in my previous version of this mock draft. Anthony Hill was my choice there. I chose Anthony Hill over Josiah Trotter. He is higher on the consensus board than Josiah Trotter. That was part of that decision. But also I think Anthony Hill gives you a little bit more range. He's a little bit better of an athlete, more speed than Josiah Trotter has. They're both just like run-stuffing kind of linebackers, but I think Anthony Hill just gives you a little bit more overall than Josiah Trotter does. But Josiah Trotter, I think, is better in what he does, in stuff in the run, than Anthony Hill. So originally, I went with Anthony Hill there. Also, they have Lou Anarumo as their defense coordinator. He asks a little bit more of his linebackers. But I also think that there's a world where he doesn't really like Anthony Hill or Josiah Trotter for his system a whole lot. He might like a Kyle Lewis more. It's tough not going linebacker here, but with Chris Bell still available, I think he is such a wonderful fit. Best player available on this board, probably best player available on the consensus board. Big, 6'2", 220 possession, but still with like good speed, especially for his size type of receiver. He ends up tearing his ACL at the end of last football season, so he's going to be one of those guys who's going to take a little bit longer to get equated to the NFL. But Indianapolis Colts aren't probably going to have their quarterback to start the season, so like they're in this place this season where it's kind of a bridge year, I would say, if anything, so that's okay. They'll be all right. But he's a really good replacement for Michael Pittman as a true X receiver option. I think just like that really good fit in this wide receiver room, and a really good talent and a good value at this point in the draft, especially if your expectations aren't really Super Bowl this year. I'm sure, they want that to be the expectations, but it really depends heavily on the recovery for Daniel Jones. Philadelphia Eagles, I ended up trading up for Kenyon Sadiq. Philadelphia fan, forgive me, I know some of you don't necessarily love Kenyon Sadiq. I know that you did re-sign Dallas Goedert, but he's a different player, does some different things, and like multiple tight end sets are the wave of the future, and your offense will be using multi-tight end sets, so it's fine. But here at pick 54, we are going to add to that safety room. I think, there's obviously routes that you could go here for Philly. Maybe they would like an R. Mason Thomas, but once again, I feel like they already did add an edge rusher, and I feel like you'd want to add more size, if anything, into that edge rush room. But I ended up going with A.J. Halsey. I think that he brings a physical presence to the safety group that they don't really have at this point in time. They've got a couple of guys who are just smaller, less come down and impact on the run. So I think A.J. Halsey really completes that room and gives you a nice little safety rotation that you can work with. That'll bring us on to the Los Angeles Chargers, who stuck at pick 22. Caden Proctor. I've done it before. I'll do it again. I almost did something different. I don't remember what different I did, but almost did something different with that pick, but I struggled to get off of that. So originally, I had in version number 1 of this, I had a familiar face coming here to John Harbaugh from Minnesota. We're looking at the edge rushers, and so that is Derek Moore out of Michigan. They know each other. Maybe Harbaugh loves Derek Moore. Maybe he would still go with Derek Moore, but at the end of the day, I think that Malachi Lawrence will end up going higher in the draft than Derek Moore does. I think that just in general, his overall prospect profile is probably a little bit more complete than Derek Moore's. I love Derek Moore, but yeah, Malachi Lawrence, a good prospect on his own. Go check out my edge rusher rankings to see how I have them all ranked. But I end up going Malachi Lawrence here, because just because you knew somebody and you got him for college doesn't mean that this is a whole new pool of players that you're choosing from. Doesn't mean that you don't see somebody else that you like even better. So Los Angeles Chargers get their edge rusher there. I think those are two good picks that hit some areas of need for the Chargers. Jacksonville Jaguars with their first and final pick of this mock draft. And I hate to do this to you because I know that offensive line is just so boring for you. And Jacksonville fans, you don't get too many mock drafts, but I'm going to give you Jennings Dunker. He's going to provide you some versatility, which is always going to be coveted. So in case there's any kind of injuries at a tackle, he can play tackle. You can see he's listed as a tackle here. And he could probably, hopefully, pitch in pretty well there and hold up for you for a few games or anything like that. He's probably going to be a guard at the NFL level. Jacksonville would like to upgrade that interior unit and bring up the floor there. I really like Jennings Dunker quite a bit. I think he's going to be a pretty darn solid, and I mean that in a good way, guard at the next level. So Jacksonville, it's not very exciting, but you know what? You know how important the offensive line is. It's important. Chicago Bears. They're the team that Tampa Bay moved with, if you didn't gather that. I've got Chicago in a win-now type of attitude. Since they hired Ben Johnson, that has been the attitude. And so I had them getting aggressive, going up to pick 15 to get Akeem Mesidor. That might feel a little bit high, but you can't just move into it. You can't just call a team and say, trade with me, and they have to say yes. So you got to start calling teams. This is probably about the highest that they're calling up to. And Tampa Bay was willing to move back. So you take the trade when you can get it, because you don't know if any of the other teams are going to get it, and they did not want this to get to Dallas, assuming that Dallas would have taken him, although, maybe that's less true now. But, they moved up for Akeem Mesidor here. So I originally had Chicago fall back from this spot here at pick 57, and I really don't hate that given what the board looks like and some of the needs that I have for them. I think that it could make sense. At the same time, like I just talked about, I have them in this win now, compete now mode, so as long as there's somebody here that they really like, just because I have struggled to figure out who it is that they're going to want at this point in the draft, it doesn't mean there isn't going to be somebody that they're going to very much just want to grab here and not move back and potentially lose out on. So that's where we're at. But what I ended up landing on here, this was a tough pick, but I found something I really like in Elijah Surratt. So I like Elijah Surratt. I have him higher up on my wide receiver board. Once I watch them again, we'll see where I end up on that. But I really like the fit of Elijah Surratt in this offense. He is a chains mover. So they've got their kind of splash play slot guy in last year's second round pick, Luther Burden. And then, of course, you've got Roma Dunze as your prototypical X, can win down the field and definitely can help you move some chains as well. But Elijah Surratt, once again, chains mover, And he really is a plus in the red zone. He's a big-time red zone threat. Had like 10 plus touchdowns at least over like the last 2 seasons, like maybe even 14 and 15 touchdowns or something like that for Indiana. He's really good in that area of the field. And Chicago struggled to finish drives last season, scored touchdowns on just 48% of red zone opportunities. That was 7th worst in the NFL. That's an area where they need to improve. On top of that, Surratt is very quarterback friendly, in part because he does a great job of catching balls away from his body, which means that in part, he's giving a big catch radius to his quarterback, and we know that Caleb Williams tends to be quite inconsistent with his accuracy, especially when he's thrown within the pocket, which, often enough is going to be those third and short situations where you're passing. So, I think that this is a really good fit. I think that Ben Johnson would like him. He's an exceptional run blocker, very willing, very tough, and good at doing it. That's another thing that Ben Johnson looks for. I could see Ben Johnson really liking Elijah Surratt. I really like him. I think he's worth a second-round pick. Consensus doesn't agree with me. Don't care. We're going Elijah Surratt. Trust me, Bears, I'm not doing this to try to screw you because you know what? It doesn't matter what I do. It only matters what they do in the actual draft. But I like Elijah Surratt there. I think that's a nice fit in that room, and I don't want to see it happen. I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see either of those two go. I don't want to see Akeem Messidor there, and I don't want to see Elijah Surratt there. I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, if you did not know. San Francisco 49ers here at pick 27. They went with Cassius Howell. That's a new one. Haven't done that yet. I do not condone what I'm about to do here at pick 58, okay? This is not me picking. I am trying to channel Kyle Shanahan. And do I think that Kyle Shanahan would be looking at running backs on day 2? Yes. Do I think it's more likely that it looks at a running back in the 3rd round? Yes. But you know what? Given what the board looks like, given this team's needs, we're just going to flip it around here. We're going to go at round 2. We're going to grab Jadarian Price. I think that he could like Jadarian Price quite a bit. Also, might like Mike Washington plenty, so maybe he would like Mike Washington more. I don't know for sure. Can't get into that man's mind. But they took an edge rusher in the 1st round. That's where a lot of the real good value is still on the board, and that I don't know that they're going to double up at that position here in rounds 1 and 2. And like I said, some of those other positions, I think they're going to be able to get some players in the 3rd round there just fine. It's Jadarian Price, man. I don't know what to tell you. It's Kyle Shanahan. Blame him, not me. Cassius Howell, Jadarian Price. That is the end of San Francisco's mock here in this 2-rounder. That's going to bring us on to the Houston Texans, who went with Keldrick Falk. Talked about that. Peter Woods. Now we've completed that defensive line. It still might need some depth though. I don't think have too much depth on the interior guys. But nothing that we have to worry here in round 2. Flag. We can go somewhere else. And offensive coordinator Nick Caley, we're going to look on the offensive side of the ball. He's used a lot of 12 personnel in his history. He was back in the day, he was with the Patriots. You remember some of those 2 tight end types of pairings that they've had. He's been with the Rams in the past, who have used 12 personnel in the past. They use 13 personnel now these days. I think that he might prefer the added versatility of a guy. So let's go to the tight end board, because we're not taking who you think I'm taking. Eli Stowers, Max Clear are, I think, the clear top 2 that are available right now. I actually have Max Clear higher up on my board, but that's not the only reason that I'm making this pick. I'm not just making it because I like Max Clear more than Eli Stowers, because Max Clear's, I think, a more complete receiver than Eli Stowers is, and I just find that these receiving only tight ends like Eli Stowers are better on paper than they tend to do in the NFL, at least in large part. Of course, when you hit on them, it's really, really nice. But and when I say receiving only, I mean like I feel like Eli Stowers is a little bit a deep threat and less effective in the short and intermediate range than just getting a wide receiver out there would be. So that's some of my personal concerns with Eli Stowers. But in terms of the fit here for Nick Caley, this is Shanahan type of system guy is part of his history there, coming from the Rams. He got some of that in there. And what you really want to do is you want to have the same exact look that you do different things out of. So you need players to be versatile. You need them to be able to do different things out of those similar looks that you're giving defenses. And Max Clare is a much better blocker than Eli Stowers is. He's a plenty good pass catcher too. He's fine. He's not Eli Stowers. He's not basically a wide receiver like Eli Stowers is, but he's fine there. And once again, adds more added versatility. So I think that he would quite potentially lobby for a Max Clare over Eli Stowers if they were to go tight end here, and those two were to both be available. That's going to bring us on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Went Ty Simpson, forgive me, please, and then Keith Abney there at pick 46. I don't think you need to forgive me for that. Keith Abney is a pretty darn cool cornerback prospect, but now we are here at pick 60, and the tight end run has begun. Now, I know that you re-signed Cade Otton, and believe me, I'm as big of a fan as Cade Otton as anybody is. I love the man, and traditionally, I'm not giving up on Cade Otton by any means, and I think that there's a reason that he got re-signed. Like, traditionally, it takes tight ends till year 4 or 5 before they break out of their shell. And a lot of times they do it, for their second team that they're on. He gets a second contract with Tampa Bay after he, obviously didn't get a good enough offer elsewhere. So I love that they bring him back. Eli Stowers is something totally different than Cade Otton, okay? So it's okay if we add Eli Stowers in here. I think the NFL kind of is moving towards having more than one tight end on the field more often. That seems to be a trend right now. And he's also just going to give them a big, deep threat. You just lost Mike Evans, 6'4", 235 pounds. So he can do a little bit of some of that Mike Evans stuff for them. I nearly went with, just to let you know, linebacker prospect that I actually have fairly low right now on my board in Kyle Lewis. And I found myself thinking, ooh, this would be a nice fit for Kyle Lewis. Ooh, this team, maybe they would be a nice fit for Kyle Lewis. I didn't end up drafting him here via the consensus board. He's, I think, 70. He's around the same area as he is on this board, on the consensus board. And Tampa Bay does have pick 77, so they could also move up from pick 77 if they just want to make sure that they get Kyle Lewis. I think that he's a guy that they might have their eyes on, though. So keep an eye out for that. But we're going to play the board, and Eli Stowers is higher on the consensus board, so we get Eli Stowers now, and then hopefully be able to get Kyle Lewis as well in at linebacker would be the dream here. So Eli Stowers it is to Tampa Bay. That will finish up their mock draft here. We got the Cleveland Browns up next, pick 4. They traded up, remember, if you caught that, for Carnell Tate at pick 4. Then they traded up again, up to pick 13. Look at, they still have, this is why they were able to trade up twice here. So traded up a couple times, got Monroe Freeland, got Carnell Tate, got their targets that are really going to help this offense to start to be able to maybe hopefully do something if their quarterback is anything. And here we are at pick 61, and we are going to look to the other side of the ball with this pick. And we're going to look on the interior of that defensive line because their defensive line room right now is Malik Collins, Mason Graham, rookie from last year, and nobody else. Plus, on top of that, Malik Collins is only under contract for this season. So looking forward, they really only have Mason Graham and maybe some nobodies, on their roster for the 2027 season. So I think you look at, once again, go back here, they don't pick again till 101. And when you look at this next group of interior defensive linemen, I don't know that any of them make it there. Grayson Halton, Dominique Orange, probably Darrell Jackson, maybe Dante Corleone. I think he's higher on the consensus board than he is here. Like this next tier, not going to really make it to them. So they're gonna start the next run here of edge interior defensive lineman with Grayson Halton. He's had a really good offseason. He's been a draft riser since the end of the college season. Stood out at the combine. So Grayson Halton for all those reasons. I like him. They only have 2 interior defensive linemen right now, so they need help there. Denver Broncos are finally on the clock after trading away their first-round pick for Jalen Waddle. Messing up this whole mock draft, make me have to re-record this video at pick 62. The Denver Broncos, they let Dre Greenlaw go, and Alex Singleton is 32 years old, which you could still get some time out of him, but we're getting to that time period. We got to start watching out for any kind of drop-off. Josiah Trotter is going to be the pick here. I just gave that up. So we're looking at linebacker. Josiah Trotter can come in and hopefully provide some snaps against the run. Drake Greenlaw, was definitely that guy who can help to establish against the run. And now we can bring Josiah Trotter to take some of those snaps up, because that's where he thrived in college. I thought about trading back from here for Denver, but Denver is all in. So just kind of like Chicago Bears, I think that they're just going to take whoever they view as being the best player available here. And at the end of the day, no matter where we draft for the Denver Broncos, the team just looks pretty darn complete on paper. Like, it's a very well-built clean team. There's a reason that they're all in right now. That's where their roster's at. Like, they got to go for it. It makes sense. So at the end of the day here, I'm taking a guess. I'm thinking that they might find Josiah Trotter to be the best guy for the role that they want to try to fill this season, as just that run-stuffing linebacker to add into this room and hopefully become a full-time linebacker into the future for them. I do think there's some good edge rushers that are available on the board right now. That they have a really good edge rush room, but that's going to start to get more and more expensive soon. So you could always try to bring a guy in there, and then that also injury-proofs that room, future-proofs it. So edge rusher could make sense if one of those guys was highest on their board, but let's go with Josiah Trotter here. Once again, we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers getting aggressive, trading up here to New England's 63rd pick of the draft. They're going to send 76, 85, 99 to New England for 63, 95, and 125 in return. They both have a lot of capital, so it made the most sense to we're just doing a pick swap here for the next 3 picks. So that is the dealio, and Pittsburgh took Vega, Ioane, Oliva Vega. Ioane. Let me know if you know how to pronounce that correctly. And then they took Lee Hunter with their first second-round pick. Now they move back up here. The linebacker room available, the guys have started to go. They're starting to run out. They get a little bit nervous that they're not going to make up to their next pick. And Pittsburgh wants to improve their run defense, and they might be ready to move on from Patrick Queen sooner than later. And neither Patrick Queen or Patrick Willis, right? Willis? I think it's Willis. Neither one of them have been good against the run. Anthony Hill, another one of these linebackers, really good against the run. He's a little bit rangier than Josiah Trotter is, but I don't think he's as good against the run as Josiah Trotter is. But nonetheless, could be the guy here that Pittsburgh would want to come in here, once again, help to just improve the run. They struggled at times last year, like through big chunks of last year at times. They improved at times too against the run, but we got to make sure to shore that up. So Anthony Hill, Lee Hunter will, I think hopefully both of them will help to do that. Seattle Seahawks went with Chris Johnson earlier in this round to start the round off. Now we're going to finish this off, and their edge rusher Dexter Lawrence is not getting any younger. He's 34 years old. As I've mentioned a few times here, these edge rushers I think have fallen to some extent, especially of course R. Mason Thomas there according to the consensus board. He's got some major size concerns. He's also one of the quickest speed rushers that's available in this draft class. I love R. Mason Thomas. I just do think that there's a chance that he's not going to be taken in the top 50 like he currently is on the consensus board because of those size limitations. 249, it's his arm length and stuff is all very short, and that's very important for edge rushers. He's another one of those guys. We'll see how the arm length measurements come in at his pro day. I don't know if that's happened yet. I got to check that out, but I am obviously looking at edge rusher here, and I'm going to go with R. Mason Thomas for the Seattle Seahawks. I think that he could be a nice fit. I just realized I misspelled his name in the article that I wrote. So thank you very much for tuning on in. R. Mason Thomas is going to finish this up, going to finish off the second round of this draft. Let's see if the first round pops up so you can kind of see that there on the screen. There is what the first round looked like. I'll scroll down so you can actually, here, let's do this. So that way you can see the whole thing. You can pause it now. Thank you so very much for tuning on through. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate y'all. Have a good one. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you liked, what you disliked.